Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast. I'm Matt Preem. I'm the only one from the group on today, but we have a special guest to join me. That's Steve Bartle of 24/7 Sports and Ute Zone to come on the show to preview this weekend's matchup. Top 15 teams, Oregon at Utah. Steve, how you doing, man? How are things going in Salt Lake City?
Man, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, and things are good, man. Weather's getting a little chilly here, which you guys are used to that up there. But yeah, it's getting a little chilly. It should be a pretty interesting game, weather-wise at least here in Salt Lake City. So be prepared for that, Duck fans.
What is it cold? Is it? I mean, last I looked, I thought it was supposed to be like 60 or 55 and sunny.
Yeah, no, something changed, and now it's looking like it's going to be 45. So
Oh,
I
geez.
don't know. It randomly changed, I guess, yesterday. That's what my wife was sharing with me yesterday. It was like, oh, it just drastically changed 10 degrees somehow. So
Oh, cool.
be prepared for the cold. It may even rain. I don't know. The weather's being weird, man.
Well, it's been a weird season for Utah. It's been a whirlwind of a season. It's been a fun season.
Yeah.
Not only have they stayed afloat, but they are winning. They are winning big games. They are in the top 15. We're going into the last weekend in October, and they are still very much in the thick of the Pac-12 championship race, despite I don't even want to call it a rash because it's like
Yeah.
it's beyond that of
Yeah.
injuries. What has kept this program chugging along as if none of these injuries have happened?
Man, it's been the coaching staff first and foremost, finding ways to win, game planning and scheming things and doing that sort of stuff. But the players buying into what the coaches are, asking them to do each and every week has been two of the most important factors. Because I'm going to list off QB1, RB2, wide receiver 3, tight end 1, tight end 2. That's just the offense. And those are just season-ending injuries. That's even before we start diving into who missed time during these weeks, and it's just a list of injuries that Utah's had to overcome, and they've had to have a number of guys step up in a number of games. The Florida game, the season opener, Utah was down their top 2 defensive tackles. Their third one was a little dinged up coming out of fall camp. So, each and every week there's been a new challenge on the health front, and yet this team just continues to find ways to win. And that's something that Kyle Whittingham talks about, every week, that every game there's a way to win. You just have to figure it out. And that's what they've done so far. It hasn't been the smoothest of operations, to say the least, with Cameron Rising and Brant Keithy, everybody wondering when they're going to come back. It's seeming like they were close to being back. Now they're not, and just what that means um, in actuality and reality for the guys at practice, specifically that quarterback room can be, super, super touch and go. If guys don't know that they're going to be the guy, if they do, and how they divvy up reps. So, now that there's at least resolution with Cam and Brant, it seemed to help Bryson Barnes. Coming out of that bye week, he was named the starter, and that's just seemed to help him kind of settle in at the position. And he's played his best ball the last 2 weeks, which is exactly what this team needs, as we enter the final month of the season. So, getting back to your questions, it's just been the coaching staff and players buying into the game plan each and every week.
Maybe building off of that, and an example of it is Whittingham, I think, has said that this is his deepest team since he's been the head coach. I think his 1 through 85 comment is as good as it's been. Was that expected going into the year, or has this kind of been, every team every year has surprises that develop throughout the season? Is this one of those, or was this kind of viewed as, hey, like we're going to be deep, we know that?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a talking point all off season long, was the depth on paper looked really, really good. Unfortunately, Utah wasn't able to utilize all of that depth together in any sort of game, but it has helped them stay afloat and stay competitive in these games. Utah's uh, so that was certainly part of it. It was expected that Utah would have depth to survive, and I think that's one thing that they've learned over the last 2 years is that if you want to win a championship, you've got to be healthy at the end of the year to be playing your best ball. And so I think that's been a goal, and to win a third straight, which was the goal this year for them. They knew that they needed their deepest team. And so they went into the transfer portal. They added a couple key pieces, specifically on that defense side of the ball, to kind of help the depth there. They had a big running back room, but that's dwindled in terms of health as well. And so there's a lot of depth, and guys are starting to emerge from what they were expected, their roles, what their expected roles were going to be coming into the year. And guys are starting to step up. A guy that comes to mind, Landon King, tight end. He was going to be the third, fourth tight end, and he's had to step up. He scored a touchdown, 2 touchdowns this season. He scored a touchdown last week against USC, and I think you're starting to see his involvement a little bit more and more each and every week. So, it's good that Utah took that approach this offseason, because, if I don't think they, it's not that they were prepared for this just insane number of injuries, but it certainly helped that they prepared and had the depth that they have coming into the season.
Let's talk big picture here for a second. Beyond this season, this is the last year in the Pac-12. We were joking about it, before we started recording the show. Of this is gonna be my first and probably last time that I'll be at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Oregon fans, they're jacked up to be in the Big Ten. I think everyone probably, from an Oregon fan perspective, wanted the league to stay intact, though.
Yeah.
How has how has Utah's fans taken in the move to the Big 12? Are they excited? Is this a spot they didn't want to be? Do they view themselves? I think they could go into that league and just straight up dominate it, bully it for a long time, as long as Whittingham's here. What's just kind of the mood of this move to the Big 12?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, right? All of the emotions, right? So, there's having gone through, an invite to a power conference before, there was a ton of excitement. It was unanimous, like everybody was excited, jacked through the roof to be joining the Pac-12 conference. And with this move, it's definitely not the same. It's definitely not the same level of excitement because it's not that it's a step down. It's not. It's going to be a very competitive league in both football and basketball. But I think just with everything that comes with being in the Pac-12, right? So, academics, first and foremost, great to be associated with the likes of, Stanford and all of those, those schools. The football history here, right? With with Oregon's recent run, Washington's, USC's long history, and all of that. So you're now tied and connected to that. And so just all of these things. Then you talk about the destinations. Portland and Oregon is such a fun place to go to. Seattle, Los Angeles. And so all of that combined, I think it's been a lot of fun for Utah fans being in the Pac-12 and being associated with these other programs. Now going to the Big 12, while it's going to be competitive on the field and it's going to be a lot of fun, and these people love their sports, it's just different. And I think that's kind of the thing that a lot of fans are, I don't want to say disappointed, but it's definitely a letdown. And I think there's no denying that. But I think there's still a lot of excitement about this opportunity to go to the Big 12 because, as you said, Utah coming into the league is going to be considered one of the top contenders, in the conference. And that's huge, especially when we start talking about, when is the next round of conference realignment? What is that going to look like? There are people that believe, we're going to have a year off, and then you start to hear, conversations ramping up again. And so, for Utah, it's a great opportunity to go into the Big 12 and to remain relevant. And I think that's so important when you're talking about, being, considered one of the top programs in the country. If you're in a league and you're winning and you're staying in the conversation, you're staying in the top 25, that's going to help Utah moving forward. So, it's definitely, it's not the same, but I think as people have started to settle in, to allow it, that news to settle in, I think there is a lot of excitement now for the league and for what it means for Utah.
Steve, let's go back to this game. Bryson Barnes is now captain. He's now QB1.
Yeah.
You mentioned the last 2 weeks he's kind of flipped a switch there for him. Just what's he bring to the table? Look, this is a guy that was, at least to my knowledge, former walk-on. I don't know if he still on scholarship now, or is
he's on scholarship now? Yep.
Okay. So, but still, a former walk-on guy that had a great story, had to work really hard to get on scholarship. What's he bring to the table? What's kind of the game plan around him? Why is he QB1?
Yeah, I think he's just a kid on the team that teammates love and teammates respect. I think that's where you need to start with the conversation with Bryson Barnes. He's a guy that's worked his tail off, that has the respect of his teammates. And I think, now that the quarterback situation has been settled, there's no longer the question looming of when is Cam going to be back. Now that we know it's going to be Bryson, I think that's allowed both him and the team to, to understand, like, and accept, like, this is what it is. Let's make the best of it. Let's go. Let's get after it. And I think that's kind of been the mindset of the team. And, for Bryson, he's a guy that, again, he's very motivated. He's very competitive. He's worked his tail off being a walk-on, but being in the quarterback competition speaks to just how competitive he is. So, he's a guy that's going to give, his guys, his team, everything that he's got. And you saw that last week against USC, especially on that last drive, considering some of the runs that he had to make and some of the decisions he made. He wanted to give his team everything that he have. And I think, like, that's the thing to understand with him first and foremost. Talking about his game, his skill set, it's improving. And I think that's the big thing. He's a guy that can make, accurate throws to the short and intermediate areas of the field. And I think that's been a missing element from this offense, that, this is a ground game that Utah wants to lean on, and it's pretty potent with Jaquindon Jackson, and now the emergence of Sione Vaki and that explosive dynamic that he's brought. And so Utah needed to find balance, because opposing defenses were just able to load up, in the box and eliminate the run. And for Utah to now have Bryson Barnes making throws that he's needed to, that he absolutely cannot miss, I think that's even brought a little bit of balance. It's shifted the balance a little bit. And I think he's a guy that still needs to make improvements, still needs to take advantage of opportunities deeper down the field. But you saw progress from week one, or not from week one, but against Cal to USC. You saw that in the numbers, but you also saw that in terms of the routes that he threw, some of the accuracy that he displayed. So I think he doesn't need to be super explosive, super dynamic, but if he can just be efficient with the ball, efficient with the throws, and protect the ball, I think that's all this Utah offense needs out of him.
You touched on him a little bit. Jaquindon Jackson, Sione Vaki, Jalen Glover. Utah always has really good running backs. It feels like every year, hopefully, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, but every year someone gets hurt late in the year, and then they just shuffle in the next guy, and it's, oh my God, this guy's really good too. This year, it's a little unique, though, because Jackson was a former quarterback. Vaki is a starting safety, and now, do we call him a starting running back? What's just made this group so really good? Really good. They are, and they're all different body types. Jackson's 230, 6'2", Glover's, the small little bowling ball that's 5'8", 200 pounds. And then there's Vaki, who's right in the middle of 6 foot, 200-pound guy. Just why is this group so good?
Well, I think it starts with Quinton Ganther and just what he's brought to the table as a coach. This Utah offense, it's they know how to coach the run. If they're going to rely on, they're going to rely on it pretty heavily, and they know how to coach it. And it's simple. It's not the most expansive run game where you're seeing a lot of different looks. You have seen more over the last couple of weeks, but they just know how to coach it up. They know how to get guys performing at a good level. And I think it speaks also to just the natural talent of these guys as well. Jaquindon Jackson, former 4-star, top 100 recruit. He was a quarterback out of Duncanville in Texas. Legendary status in the state of Texas if you talk to people that follow Texas high school football. So, he came out as a dual threat quarterback. A lot of talk at Texas about moving him to linebacker, but comes to Utah to play quarterback. He makes the move last year, and just his progression from, Arizona State was the first week that he played running back to the end of the season where he was making those big runs against Colorado, USC, and even Penn State in the Rose Bowl. He's been dealing with a nagging injury, which has limited his availability 2 points this season. But after the bye week, he had a lot. He missed the Oregon State game, had the bye week, and then he looked really good against Cal, looked really good against USC, and you just see those natural instincts with him. And then Sione Vaki, two-way star in the Pac-12 right now, just shining bright. You go back to high school, he was a dynamic two-way player in high school. Right. He played receiver, grew up playing running back. So that's where, this natural ability, these natural instincts come from, is he's played offense, all in high school growing up. So, it's with Sione, it's going to be interesting because, do we see his role continue to expand? And I think, I do think we see that. He's just added a spark to this offense and works really, really well with Jaquindon Jackson, who's a dynamic playmaker in his own right. He ripped off a couple 20-yard runs each of the last 2 weeks as well. So, they work well together, and Utah's just now starting to get, better traction up front with their offensive line, and that run game is starting to get going.
We don't have to spend too much time here, but I wanted to at least acknowledge Utah's offensive line because they're always really good from my perspective. And you look at the starts and the career games played, and it feels like every year somehow they figure out a way to have 3 or 4 guys that have 30 career games going into whenever they play Oregon, 20 career starts. They're always experienced. And I think from a Duck fan perspective, if you're listening to this, their left tackle, Spencer Fano, a true freshman, someone that Oregon really wanted to get, and Spencer stayed home, went to Utah. How has he looked around a group of offensive linemen that are all pretty veteran?
Yeah, it's been good first and foremost for Spencer Fano. I think when you understand the context that it's really rare for a true freshman to come in and start as. Yeah, and Oregon should know all about that. You've, recruited studs up there along the offensive line. It's tough to come in as a true freshman and start and make a big positive impact. But I think Spencer Fano has done a good job, right? He's done the job that he's needed to. There's been mistakes. There's been ups and downs. But, overall, he's done a good job. And he's been dinged up. He got injured against Oregon State, so he's been battling that. But he played the majority of the snaps against USC and fared really well against that athletic front. So, he's seen a lot of firsts, right? As a true freshman, the sort of athletes that you're competing against at this level is it's pretty unique, on a week to week basis, just how different body types and athletes that he's coming across, and he's done well. So, he's continued to garner respect across the conference and across the country. Number of publications look at him as one of the top freshman offensive linemen in the country, and he's lived up to that. And then with the rest of the offensive line, it's I think, like I said, they're just starting to hit their stride as well. I think with all of the issues at quarterback and the lack of a passing game, I think it really started to compound issues for Utah in that last week, specifically against Oregon State. And yet after the bye week, they've kind of figured some things out. Coley Faiu entered the starting lineup as a young guy at center, and he's kind of helped address some things, generate more push up front and that sort of stuff. But overall, I think the offensive line is trending in the right direction in terms of their play in both pass pro and the run game. But this is going to be the toughest test this year. Oregon has a tough defensive front, great defensive mind in Dan Lanning, and this is definitely going to be the toughest test. And they've faced some pretty good defensive fronts this year. Florida, they've got athletes, they've got gigantic bodies. UCLA, Oregon State likes to get after it as well, and so they'll. But this is the big one for sure.
Let's spend just a little bit of time on the defensive side of the ball. And we have to start with Jonah Ellis. Maybe the Pac-12's best pass rusher. What has he got? Like 10 sacks this season so far. Absolutely tremendous player. He's only a junior too, so technically he could come back. But good God, why would he? Go make your money, young man. 15 career starts, 32 games. Just what makes him so good, and just what makes this Utah front. We know the answer. They're always good up front. But what makes Jonah Ellis the tip of the spear for Utah?
Yeah, no, Jonas has been great, and he's really stepped up. And what's interesting is if you go back to last year, he was just starting to come into his own. And then he got hurt the week of that Oregon game last year and missed the rest of the season. And so I think there was, like I said, like he was just starting to come into his own. I think he had a couple games where he had a sack consecutively, and there was a growing excitement around Jonah Ellis where it seemed like, okay, the light has come on for him. And so for him, being that close, I think that was extra motivation for him this offseason to kind of, continue to prepare and prepare to take that next step. And he's come into this season, and man, the athleticism, the pass rush plan that he has, that was one thing that he really wanted to work on, was understanding how to have a plan. If I do this and the offensive tackle does that, how do I react, and that sort of thing. And so, he's prepared himself and to be a good pass rusher this year, and you've seen it this year with 10 sacks. He leads the conference, the Pac-12, which has some great pass rushers, right? Latu at UCLA, Traylon Bryce at Washington, and Brandon Dorlus at Oregon as well in there. And there's just a number of good defensive linemen. Jonah Ellis has taken a big leap, and it goes back to his work that he put in this offseason. And man, he's put it all together. Having your dad be Luther Ellis, who was a tremendous, defensive lineman back in the 90s, playing in the NFL, that certainly helps too. But no, he's been really good. And, this defensive front, it all starts with the defensive tackles. Their job is to clog things up, and that's what they do. And they keep those linebackers free. They keep the edge rushers free, and they do a good job up front of keeping things clean for everybody around them. So it all starts with the defensive tackles. When Utah's got a good group of defensive tackles, it tends to bode well for the rest of the defense, and that's what they've got this year.
Maybe the last question defensively before we get to the big picture game outlook type stuff. Who matches up against Troy Franklin? Oregon's star receiver, one of the best players in college football at that position. Yeah. Utah's always had elite DBs. We know it. We expect it. Who is that guy that you think lines up, with Troy, or do they kind of go committee and just rotate a bunch of dudes at him?
Yeah, I think that's what we'll see it committee. I'm not sure that Utah has a Jalen Johnson or a Clark Phillips this year where they have a guy that they feel can match up. They call it their star coverage. When they do that, when they have a guy that just, okay, you've got him, it's one-on-one, mano-a-mano. I'm not sure they have that, but they do have a guy in Zemiah Vaughn that there's a growing confidence in him, a growing optimism, especially when talking about the next level. I think he's starting to put himself on the map there. He's a third-year guy. He joined the program in 2020, 6'2", 185 pounds, was a quarterback all through high school, and they converted him to the defense side of the ball. He had started to emerge in 2021 towards the tail end of the season. Had a good year last year, but he's really kind of taken a good step forward this year. And really the last couple of weeks has taken his game to another level. So he's probably the top guy on the board for Utah at cornerback, and will probably match up with Troy Franklin a good amount. That would be a fun battle. Zamiah Vaughn is, like I said, 6'2", 185, good length, good athleticism. He's a 4'4" type athlete. And so just a good matchup physically, athletically. But Troy Franklin, man, he's incredible ball skills. That's going to be tough. Utah's got a couple other corners. Miles Battle, 6'4", 195 pounds, a lot of length there. JT Broughton, 6 foot. So they've got guys to match up with them to give him different looks, and I think that's going to be key. And it'll be interesting though, man. Troy Franklin, I remember being at a Utah camp when Troy was, I think he was a sophomore going into his junior year, and he had the Utah camp in a buzz because he's just making grabs over seniors. Yeah. And it was apparent there that he was going to be really, really good. And so, man, I've seen it up close. Like he's good. He's got incredible ball skills.
Yeah. He's got a chance to go down as Oregon's greatest receiver of all time, at least statistically speaking.
Yeah.
And that he's on a career path right now. We'll wrap it up here. What are the keys for Utah to get a victory? What are the things that you think just have to happen for a win to be possible?
Yeah, I think what has to happen, Utah has to establish the run game, which is going to be tough. Oregon's good against the run. And then, Bryson, to me, all the questions, and not all of the questions, but the most important questions always start with the offensive side of the ball, because we kind of know what to expect with Utah on the defensive side. But for me, it's they need to establish the run first and foremost, because that's the foundation of your offense and what you build your success on. And then can Bryson Barnes, can he continue to build on his, good performances the last 2 weeks and at least provide, take advantage of opportunities that present themselves? Can he make throws that he can? Can he continue to make the throws that he needs to, that he cannot miss? As long as he does that, Utah will have a chance. But this Oregon team, it's going to require their best, their absolute best. This is the most balanced team, both offensively and defensively. And then, this is also the biggest, toughest, most physical team that they've faced as well, which that's been the missing element in a lot of these previous games. Utah's just out toughed a lot of these teams, but I don't know that they'll be able to do that with the Ducks.
I'm not going to ask you to make a score prediction, but do you think we get more points than 37 combined? I mean, last year Oregon won 20-17.
Man,
what's kind of your number? Are we thinking it's going to be low like that? I said it's probably going to be low 30s to high 20s.
Yeah,
I think there's going to be points.
I think there's going to be points. I would say, I feel like an over/under is probably going to be like around 40 for me. I think they can both push, get a couple touchdowns. I think we can get that, but it's going to be, man, like I said, like these teams, I don't want to say they're mirror images of each, because they're not, but defensively, very, very similar defensively. Can Utah utilize the crowd to their advantage? Does that, benefit them, where that's now, 12th man of sorts for Utah? That's going to be the key for them in competing against that potent offense that Oregon has, that Utah doesn't have, right? Utah doesn't have that in this matchup. They've been better balanced. They've been averaging over 400 yards, but I think this is going to be another defensive slugfest. And I think I would look 35-40 point total there for me.
Steve, thanks for coming on the show. Look forward to catching up with you in the press box. 1:30 local kick, 12:30 Pacific time. Game on Fox. The big boys calling this one. Joel Klatt, Gus Johnson, Jenny Taft on Fox. Steve, thanks for coming on the show. Look forward to meeting with you Saturday.
Sounds good, Matt. Appreciate you, man.